The silent cryth crystal spires of Nexus Prime gleamed like diamonds against the purple sky. As elder scientist Kale Vorthik made his way through the grand observatory, his elongated fingers traced the smooth walls of the ancient structure, feeling the gentle vibrations of knowledge flowing through the crystalline networks that connected every building on the planet. The Zelthani had built their civilization around the pursuit of wisdom and peace, transforming their world into a living library where information flowed as freely as water. Kale paused at the observation deck, his large, luminous eyes taking in the beauty of his homeworld. Floating gardens drifted between the crystal towers, their bioluminescent plants creating patterns of soft light that pulsed in harmony with the planet's natural rhythms. In the distance, the great archive stretched toward the horizon, its translucent walls containing the collected knowledge of 300 civilizations that the Zelthani had encountered in their peaceful explorations of the galaxy. The Zelthani had never needed weapons or armies. Their advanced technology could shield entire continents. Their diplomatic skills had prevented wars across 7 star systems, and their scientific achievements had earned them respect throughout the galactic community. They were the keepers of knowledge, the peaceful mediators who helped other species resolve conflicts without bloodshed. War was an alien concept to them, something they studied only in historical texts about primitive civilizations. That morning changed everything. The first sign of trouble came when the orbital monitoring stations went silent, their crystal-based communication rays simply stopping their gentle songs. Kale felt the disturbance through the planet's neural network, a wrongness that made his skin crawl with unfamiliar fear. He rushed to the main sensor array, his robes billowing behind him as he ran through corridors that had known only scholarly contemplation for millennia. The images that appeared on the viewing screens defied comprehension. Massive organic shapes moved through space around Nexus Prime, their surfaces black as the void between stars, but pulsing with veins of sickly red light. They looked like enormous parasites, each one larger than the Zelthani's greatest cities. As Kale watched in horror, tentacles extended from these creatures toward the planet's surface, piercing through the protective shields as if they were made of paper. By the eternal archives, whispered Dr. Lyra Nethys, Kel's assistant, her voice barely audible. What are those things? Kel's mind raced through everything he had ever learned about hostile alien species. The Zelthani databases contained information about countless civilizations, including those that had vanished without explanation. Suddenly, fragments of ancient warnings clicked into place, like pieces of a terrible puzzle. The Shadow Maw Collective. He breathed, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. The legend spoke of a hive mind that consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing behind but empty husks floating in space. They were said to be parasites on a galactic scale, creatures that fed not just on biological matter but on the very essence of civilization itself. Most scholars believed they were myths, stories told to frighten young beings around campfires. But the evidence was undeniable as the organic ships began their descent toward Nexus Prime. Where the Shadow Maw touched down, the crystal spires began to change. The beautiful, translucent structures turned black, their surfaces writhing with the same red veins that covered the alien ships. The knowledge networks that had taken centuries to grow were being corrupted, transformed into something alien and malevolent. Kale watched in anguish as the great archive's walls pulsed with infected light, its precious contents being consumed by the invaders. The Zelthani tried to evacuate, but they had no weapons to fight back and no military to organize a defense. Their peace-loving nature had left them completely unprepared for an enemy that showed no interest in negotiation or mercy. Families fled through the crystal corridors while the infection spread, transforming their beautiful city into a nightmare of organic growth and pulsing darkness. Kale made a desperate decision, racing to the planetary communication center. He began composing a message that would be broadcast across the entire galaxy. His fingers trembled as he activated the ancient deep space transmitters, devices that could reach civilizations in the farthest corners of known space. The transmission would drain the planet's remaining power reserves, but if there was any hope of survival, it lay in appealing to the galaxy's conscience. This is elder scientist Kale Vorthik of the Zelthani people, he began, his voice steady. Despite the chaos around him, our world of Nexus Prime is under attack by a force we cannot resist. We are a peaceful species with no military, no weapons, no way to defend ourselves. The Shadow Maw Collective has come to our world, and they are consuming everything we have built, everything we are. The building shook as another section of the city fell to the infection. Through the crystal walls, Kale could see Zelthani civilians running in terror as organic growths erupted from the ground beneath their feet. We have preserved the knowledge of 300 civilizations in our archives. We have mediated peace between species, shared scientific discoveries, and helped countless worlds avoid the horrors of war. Now we face extinction, and all that knowledge will die with us." His voice broke as he continued. "I know that most of you will not answer. The Shadow Maw are feared throughout the galaxy, and no rational species would risk their own survival for strangers. But if there is anyone out there who believes that knowledge should be preserved, that peaceful civilizations deserve protection, please help us. We have perhaps hours before we are extinct." The transmission raced through space, bouncing from relay station to relay station, carrying the Zelthani's desperate plea to every corner of the galaxy. On 100 worlds, the message was received and filed away as another tragedy that was not their problem. The Galactic Federation debated for hours about the political implications of intervention. The hegemony of advanced worlds expressed sympathy, but explained that they could not risk their own citizens. The Merchant Coalition calculated that the cost of military action would exceed any potential profits, but in the outer rim of the galaxy, on a small blue world orbiting a yellow star, the message reached beings who had never learned to ignore a cry for help. The humans of Earth had only recently joined the galactic community, and they were still regarded with suspicion by most advanced civilizations. They came from what the galaxy called a Deathworld, a planet where everything from the weather to the wildlife actively tried to kill its inhabitants. Most species considered them dangerous primitives, barely civilized predators who had somehow stumbled upon space travel. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of Lunabase, watching the Zelthani transmission for the third time around her. The officers of the Solar Defense Initiative worked frantically to analyze the situation and locate the source of the distress call. Earth's military had been built to defend against threats that most galactic species couldn't imagine, forged in conflicts that had shaped humanity's character over millennia of warfare. "Admiral," reported Commander David Park, his voice tight with urgency, "we've confirmed the location. Nexus Prime is in the Kepler 440 system, approximately 53 light-years from Earth. Our fastest ships could reach it in 18 hours using the new quantum drives." Chen nodded grimly. She had been expecting this moment ever since humanity had learned about the various threats that lurked in the galaxy's dark corners. The other species had welcomed Earth into the galactic community with polite reluctance, making it clear that humans were considered useful but dangerous allies. They were good for handling problems that required brute force, but they weren't trusted with important diplomatic or scientific matters. "What's our force readiness?" Chen asked. Though she already knew the answer, the Solar Defense Initiative maintained a constant state of preparation, recognizing that Earth's location on the galactic frontier made it vulnerable to exactly this kind of threat. "We have 12 heavy cruisers, 36 destroyers, and the experimental dreadnought Ironclad ready for immediate deployment," Park replied. "Captain Morrison's crew has been running combat drills all week. They can be space-worthy in 4 hours. Chen turned to the tactical display showing the galaxy map. Most species would wait for consensus, form committees, and debate the risks for days or weeks before taking action. But humans had learned a long time ago that sometimes the right thing to do was also the dangerous thing to do. "Send word to the fleet. We launch in 6 hours. And get me Captain Morrison." Captain Jake Morrison was in the middle of a training simulation when the alert came through. He was a veteran of the Mars colonial wars and the asteroid belt conflicts, a man who had earned his rank fighting pirates in corporate armies in the harsh environment of the outer solar system. His ship, the Ironclad, was humanity's most advanced warship, equipped with experimental weapons and armor that could withstand the crushing pressures of gas giant atmospheres. "Captain," his communications officer announced, "Admiral Chen is requesting immediate contact." Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead and activated the holo communicator. Chen's image appeared before him, her expression grave. "Jake, we've received a distress call from an alien species, under attack by hostiles. We're mounting a rescue operation. How long do we have to prepare?" Morrison asked, already mentally running through the checklist of combat preparations. "For hours," Chen replied. "And Jake, this isn't a police action or a border dispute. We're looking at a full-scale invasion by something called the Shadow Maw Collective. The intelligence report suggests there's some kind of hive mind that consumes entire civilizations." Morrison felt a familiar rush of adrenaline, the same feeling he'd experienced before every major battle of his career. "Understood, Admiral. The Ironclad will be ready." As the human fleet prepared for departure, the Galactic Federation sent urgent warnings advising against intervention. The Shadow Maw Collective was considered one of the galaxy's greatest threats, a force that had destroyed dozens of advanced civilizations over the past millennium. No single species had ever successfully fought them and won. The Federation's message was clear: Any species that interfered would likely share the Zelthani's fate. But Admiral Chen had grown up on a world where hurricanes could level cities, where volcanic eruptions could change the climate, and where the ancestors of humanity had survived ice ages and asteroid impacts through sheer stubborn determination. She read the Federation's warning, filed it away, and continued with the launch preparations. 6 hours after receiving the Zelthani distress call, the human fleet entered hyperspace, racing toward a distant world where peaceful scholars were being consumed by ancient nightmares. Behind them, Earth continued its steady rotation around the sun, unaware that its children were about to announce humanity's presence to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. In the depths of space, the quantum drives of human warships bent reality around them, carrying hope toward Nexus Prime at faster than light speeds. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when someone threatened the innocent while humans were listening. The Deathworlders were coming, and they were bringing all the violence and determination that their harsh planet had bred into them over millions of years of evolution. The Shadow Maw Collective had faced many enemies over the centuries, but they had never encountered a species that considered impossible odds to be just another Tuesday. They were about to receive an education in the difference between predators and protectors, and the lesson would be written in fire across the stars. Deathworld Warrior's human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Nexus Prime system, like thunder breaking across a silent sky. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Ironclad, staring at the horror that greeted them through the main view screen. The planet that had once been a jewel of crystalline beauty was now a festering wound against the black of space, its surface crawling with veins of pulsing red light that spread like an infection across continents. "Sweet Jesus," whispered Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim, Morrison's tactical officer. "What have they done to that world?" Massive organic structures hung in orbit around Nexus Prime like bloated ticks attached to a dying animal. Each Shadow Maw bioship was easily the size of a small moon, their black surfaces rippling with what looked like breathing patterns. Smaller organisms swarmed around the larger vessels, like antibodies in a bloodstream, creating a defensive network that pulsed with malevolent intelligence. "Captain," reported Ensign Marcus Webb from the sensor station, his voice tight with disbelief. "I'm reading 47 major bioships in orbit, plus hundreds of smaller craft. The planet's surface, sir, approximately 60% of the landmass has been converted to some kind of organic matrix." Morrison felt his jaw clench as he processed the numbers. The human fleet consisted of 48 vessels total, and they were facing an enemy force that had already consumed most of a civilization. By any rational military doctrine, they should retreat immediately and call for massive reinforcements. But Morrison had grown up in the slums of New Detroit, where running from a fight usually meant someone else got hurt worse than you would. "Communications," he ordered. "Patch me through to Admiral Chen." Chen's face appeared on the tactical display, her expression grim as she studied the same devastating images. "Jake, the situation is worse than we anticipated. Long-range scans show the Shadow Maw have been here for at least 72 hours. Most population centers are either destroyed or converted." "Any signs of survivors?" Morrison asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Thermal imaging shows pockets of life signs in the underground complexes. The Zelthani built extensive subterranean research facilities. If anyone's still alive, that's where they'll be." Morrison nodded, his mind already working through tactical possibilities. The smart play would be to call this a lost cause and focus on preventing the Shadow Maw from spreading to other worlds. But somewhere down on that infected planet, people were hiding in the dark, waiting for rescue that might never come. He thought about the desperate voice in the transmission, the scholar who had spent his final moments begging the galaxy for help. "Admiral," Morrison said slowly, "I'm requesting permission to begin combat operations." There was a long pause as Chen considered the implications. The human fleet was outnumbered and facing an enemy they barely understood. If they failed here, Earth itself might become a target. But she had not risen to command the Solar Defense Initiative by making safe choices. "Permission granted, Captain. Show them what happens when they pick on librarians while humans are watching." The battle began with a demonstration of why other galactic species considered humans to be dangerously unpredictable. While most civilized military doctrine emphasized careful maneuvering and calculated strikes, Morrison ordered a direct assault on the largest concentration of enemy ships. The human vessels accelerated toward the Shadow Maw formation like bullets fired from a gun, their nuclear engines blazing trails of blue fire across the darkness. The Shadow Maw responded with what appeared to be confusion. Their bioships began moving to intercept, but their movements were slow and ponderous, designed for overwhelming stationary targets rather than engaging nimble opponents. The organic vessels fired streams of corrosive bioplasma that could dissolve most known materials, but the human ships danced between the attacks with an agility that defied their size. Lieutenant Commander Kim watched her tactical display with growing excitement as the human destroyers weaved through the enemy formation. "Captain, their targeting systems can't keep up with our maneuvering. It's like they've never fought anyone who moves this fast." Morrison smiled grimly. "Human ships were built to operate in Earth's chaotic solar system, where asteroid impacts and solar storms were constant threats. Their pilots had trained in environments that would crush most galactic species, learning to react with split-second timing to dangers that moved at orbital velocities. Against enemies accustomed to fighting sedentary targets, they were like wolves attacking cattle." The ironclad led the charge directly into the heart of the Shadowmaw formation, its armor plating designed to withstand the pressure of gas giant atmospheres. When bioplasma struck the ship's hull, it hissed and steamed but failed to penetrate the military-grade ceramics that had been forged in the solar winds of Mercury. Morrison ordered all weapons to fire simultaneously, and the space around his ship lit up with the fury of human engineering. Railguns launched tungsten projectiles at significant fractions of light speed, punching through organic holes like bullets through flesh. Missile systems designed to crack asteroids exploded inside bioships, filling their internal spaces with nuclear fire. Plasma cannons that had been tested in the chromosphere of the sun burned through Shadowmaw armor as if it were paper. The largest bioship, a massive creature that pulsed with the rhythm of an enormous heart, turned to focus its attention on the human dreadnought. Tentacles the size of skyscrapers reached out to ensnare the ironclad, their surfaces dripping with acids that could dissolve titanium. But Morrison had fought corporate mining ships in the asteroid belt, vessels that used similar grabbing tactics. To claim valuable rocks, evasive pattern Delta 7, he ordered calmly, "Target the tentacle joints and fire for effect." The ironclad rolled and twisted like a living thing, its gyroscopic systems allowing maneuvers that would have torn apart less robust vessels. Focused plasma beams sliced through the grasping appendages, sending sprays of alien blood boiling into space. The bioship's scream of pain was transmitted through electromagnetic frequencies, a sound of such pure agony that it made several crew members physically ill. While the space battle raged overhead, Sergeant Maria Santos prepared her elite Marine unit for the most dangerous mission of their careers. Santos had earned her rank fighting in the tunnels beneath Titan's ice, where atmospheric pressure could crush an unprotected human in milliseconds, and where every breath had to be recycled through life support systems. Her troops were veterans of conflicts that most galactic species couldn't even comprehend. "Listen up, Marines," Santos addressed her squad as they checked their equipment one final time. "We're going down to extract survivors from a hostile environment. The atmosphere is toxic. The gravity is different from Earth standard, and the entire planet is crawling with things that want to eat us. In other words, it's Tuesday." The Marines laughed grimly as they sealed their power armor. Each suit was a marvel of human engineering, designed to protect its wearer in environments ranging from the volcanic surface of Io to the crushing depths of Europa's oceans. Against alien bioweapons, they would provide the margin of survival that could mean the difference between rescue and disaster. Dr. Elena Rodriguez monitored the descent from her position aboard the research vessel Newton. As the fleet's xenobiologist, she had been studying the Shadowmaw organisms through long-range sensors, trying to understand their biology and identify potential weaknesses. What she discovered challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about the ancient enemy. "Captain Morrison," she reported over the communication system, "I'm seeing something unprecedented in these bio-readings. The Shadowmaw organisms aren't just consuming the planet, they're trying to understand it. They're attempting to integrate Zelthani knowledge into their collective consciousness." Morrison frowned as he processed this information. "What does that mean for our mission?" "It means they're more vulnerable than anyone realized," Rodriguez replied excitedly. "The Shadowmaw hive mind is having trouble processing peaceful, scholarly thought patterns. The Zelthani's pacifist nature is acting like a virus in their system, creating confusion and instability in their collective intelligence. This revelation changed everything. If the Shadowmaw were struggling to integrate peaceful thoughts, then perhaps they could be disrupted by introducing even more alien concepts into their system." Morrison began forming a plan that was so audacious it bordered on insanity, but that had never stopped humans before. Santos and her Marines reached the planet's surface just as the space battle above reached its climax. The landscape was a nightmare of organic growth and pulsing corruption, where crystal spires had been transformed into twisted monuments to alien hunger. But beneath the surface, in the deep research complexes that the Zelthani had built to house their most precious knowledge, signs of life still flickered. The Marines moved through the infected tunnels with practiced efficiency, their weapons designed to function in any environment. where they encountered Shadow Maw organisms. They responded with the kind of overwhelming violence that had made Earth's military legendary. Throughout human space, flamethrowers that burned at temperatures approaching those found in stellar cores reduced organic barriers to ash. Explosive charges that had been tested against asteroid cores shattered bioconstructs into fragments. But it was when they reached the first group of survivors that the true character of humanity showed itself. Elder scientist Kale Vorthik huddled with 30 other Zelthani in a sealed chamber, their crystalline skin pale with terror and their large eyes wide with despair. They had spent days listening to the sounds of their world being consumed, expecting death to find them at any moment. Sanos removed her helmet, revealing a scarred face that spoke of battles fought in places where most species could not survive. "Sir," she said gently to Kale, "I'm Sergeant Sandos of the Earth Marine Corps. We're here to get you out." Kale stared at her in amazement. The human was shorter than any Zelthani, built with the compact musculature of a predator, and her eyes held the kind of focused intensity that spoke of a lifetime spent facing danger. But when she extended her hand to help him up, her touch was gentle, and her voice carried the unmistakable accent of someone who meant what she said. "You came," Kale whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. "The galaxy ignored our plea, but you came." Sanos smiled, and for a moment the hardened warrior disappeared, replaced by someone who understood what it meant to protect those who could not protect themselves. "Sir, where I come from, when someone asks for help, you answer, no matter what." The evacuation proceeded with military precision, as human transports landed throughout the infected zones, their crews working frantically to load survivors while the battle raged overhead. Each rescue ship was a fortress of human engineering, capable of atmospheric flight in conditions that would destroy most galactic vessels. They darted between organic growths and corrosive attacks, their pilots displaying the kind of reckless courage that had made humanity notorious throughout known space. Above the planet, the space battle reached its turning point when Dr. Rodriguez implemented her theoretical weapon against the Shadow Maw hive mind. Using the Ironclad's communication ray, she began broadcasting pure mathematical concepts directly into the bioship's neural networks. The equations were beautiful in their simplicity, representing the kind of peaceful intellectual achievement that the Zelthani had dedicated their lives to pursuing. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Shadow Maw collective consciousness, already struggling to process the unfamiliar patterns of pacifist thought, began to experience what could only be described as a mental breakdown. Bioships that had moved with perfect coordination suddenly began firing on each other, their hive mind fractured by concepts it could not assimilate. Morrison watched in amazement as the enemy formation dissolved into chaos. "All ships, press the attack. Target the largest bioconstructs while they're confused." The human fleet struck with the fury of a species that had learned to fight for survival on a world that actively tried to kill its inhabitants. Nuclear warheads designed to deflect planet-killing asteroids turned bioships into expanding clouds of superheated plasma. Kinetic weapons that could punch through continental bedrock shattered organic hulls like glass. But the Shadow Maw were learning, adapting, evolving their tactics in real time. The smaller organisms began coordinating independent attacks, no longer relying on the compromised hive mind for direction. The battle was far from over, and reinforcements were already being called from the depths of space where the main Shadow Maw fleet waited in the darkness between stars. As the last transport lifted off from Nexus Prime's surface, carrying precious cargo of Zelthani survivors and salvaged knowledge, Morrison realized that they had won a battle, but not the war. The real test was yet to come when the ancient enemy arrived in force to reclaim what they considered their rightful prey. The humans had announced their presence to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible, proving that Deathworlders could be heroes as well as warriors. But the Shadow Maw collective had existed for millennia, consuming civilizations across the galaxy, and they would not allow this defeat to go unanswered. In the depths of space, something vast and terrible began moving toward the Nexus Prime system, carrying with it the accumulated hunger of 1,000 devoured worlds. The real battle was about to begin. The Galaxy Awakens hyperspace alarm shrieked through the human fleet as massive signatures appeared at the edge of the Nexus Prime system. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the Ironclad, watching his tactical display fill with enemy contacts that defied comprehension. What emerged from the twisted dimensions of faster-than-light travel was not a fleet, but an invasion force that blotted out the stars themselves. "Mother of God," whispered Lieutenant Commander Kim, her voice barely audible over the bridge's emergency lighting. "Captain, I'm counting over 300 major bioships. Each one is at least twice the size of anything we've seen before." The Shadow Maw main fleet had arrived, and it brought with it the accumulated hunger of centuries. The bioships that, emerged from hyperspace were ancient beyond measure. Their organic hulls scarred by battles against civilizations that existed only in galactic legends. At the center of the formation was something that made even the largest vessels look insignificant by comparison, a bioconstruct the size of a small moon, pulsing with malevolent intelligence that seemed to reach across space itself. Admiral Chen's voice crackled over the communication system from her flagship. All vessels, this is Admiral Chen. We are facing odds of approximately 8-1 against an enemy that has never been defeated in recorded galactic history. Standard military doctrine would recommend immediate withdrawal to preserve our forces for future engagement. Morrison waited, knowing that his commander was about to demonstrate why humans had earned their reputation as the galaxy's most stubborn species. However, Chen continued, her voice growing stronger. We came here to rescue innocent people, and there are still Zelthani survivors on that planet who are counting on us. We don't abandon our missions, and we don't abandon people who need our help. All ships, prepare for combat. We're going to show these parasites what happens when they mess with librarians. While humans are watching, the human fleet, tiny against the approaching swarm, began moving into attack formation. On Earth, this would have been called a suicide mission. In human space, it was just called Tuesday. Elder scientist Kale Vorthik stood in the medical bay of the human transport ship Defiance, watching through the viewports as the impossible battle began to unfold. Around him, other Zelthani survivors huddled together, their crystalline skin glowing faintly with bioluminescent patterns that reflected their emotional states. The patterns showed fear, certainly, but also something that had not existed in Zelthani culture for millennia, the hope that warriors might protect those who could not fight for themselves. Why do they stay? Asked Dr. Lyranethus, her voice filled with wonder. Their fleet is outnumbered beyond any hope of victory. Logic dictates retreat. Kale studied the humans moving through their ship with purposeful efficiency. Each crew member he had observed showed the same characteristics: compact builds that spoke of high-gravity worlds, eyes that missed nothing, and movements that suggested they were always ready for violence. But more than that, they showed a fierce protectiveness toward anyone they considered under their care. I think, Kale said slowly, that we are seeing something the galaxy has forgotten. These humans do not fight for logic or profit or political advantage. They fight because they believe it is the right thing to do. The battle began with the Shadow Maw launching what appeared to be every small organism in their fleet simultaneously. Millions of biofighters swarmed toward the human vessels like a living cloud of death, each one designed to burrow through ship hulls and consume everything inside. It was a tactic that had overwhelmed countless civilizations, turning their own military strength against them through sheer numbers. But humans had learned to fight in environments where being outnumbered was the normal state of affairs. Earth's military doctrine had been shaped by conflicts where small groups of defenders had to hold against overwhelming odds, where every bullet had to count and every decision could mean the difference between survival and extinction. The human ships activated their point defense systems, and space around the fleet lit up like a 4th of July celebration. Thousands of small turrets tracked incoming threats with the precision of predators evolved to catch fast-moving prey. Explosive shells designed to intercept incoming asteroids shredded biofighters by the hundreds, filling space with clouds of organic debris. Sergeant Sanos watched the light show from the viewing deck of her transport. Her Marines gathered around her as they observed their fleet's incredible display of firepower. Look at that, she said proudly. Every single one of those point defense gunners grew up playing video games, where missing a target meant starting over. The Shadow Mod just brought a numbers game to a species that invented arcade shooters. But the real shock came when the human capital ships began their attack run. Instead of maintaining safe distances like civilized military forces, they accelerated directly toward the Shadow Maw formation, their nuclear engines burning like small suns against the darkness. The bioships tried to respond with their corrosive weapons, but human vessels moved with an unpredictability that seemed to border on insanity. Captain Morrison stood at the center of it all, directing the ironclad through a combat maneuver that would have been impossible for most galactic species to even comprehend. His ship rolled and twisted through three-dimensional space, while maintaining a steady barrage of fire, its weapon systems calibrated to track targets moving at orbital velocities. Captain, reported Ensign Webb, excitement clear in his voice. The enemy formation is beginning to break up. They can't maintain coordination when we're moving this close to their command vessels. Morrison smiled grimly. Human military doctrine had been shaped by fighting in Earth's crowded solar system, where battles took place among asteroids, gas giant rings, and solar storms that would destroy less robust vessels. They had learned to use chaos as a weapon, turning environmental hazards into tactical advantages. But as the battle raged, something unprecedented began to happen across the galaxy. Elder Kale, working from the transport ship's communication array, had been broadcasting continuous updates about the human intervention to every Zelthani research station in known space. The message was simple but powerful. Peaceful scholars were being protected by warriors from a distant world, proving that courage still existed in a galaxy that had grown complacent. The first to respond was the Hegemony Border Guard, a military force that had been created to defend against exactly this kind of threat, but had never been used in actual combat. Commander Thane Zirian listened to the Zelthani broadcast from his flagship constellation, watching long-range sensor feeds of humans fighting impossible odds to protect people they had never met. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the Galactic Federation is ordering all military units to maintain position and await further instructions." Thane studied the display showing human ships dancing through enemy fire, like fighters performing a deadly ballet. These aliens from the Galactic Rim were demonstrating the kind of valor that the Hegemony had always claimed to represent but had never actually practiced. "Signal the fleet," Thane ordered. "We're going to assist the human rescue operation, sir." "That's a direct violation of Federation orders." Thane turned to face his bridge crew, his expression grim but determined. Sometimes, doing the right thing means disobeying the wrong orders. These humans traveled 50 light years to save people they don't even know. The least we can do is back them up. The Hegemony fleet entered hyperspace, carrying with it the hopes of a military force that had finally found a worthy cause to fight for. But they were not alone. Across the galaxy, the Zelthani broadcasts were being received by species that had grown tired of watching atrocities unfold while their governments debated political implications. Dr. Elena Rodriguez made a crucial discovery while analyzing the Shadow Maw bioconstructs during the battle. Working from her laboratory aboard the research vessel Newton, she had been studying tissue samples recovered from destroyed enemy ships, trying to understand the biological mechanisms that made the hive mind function. "Captain Morrison," she reported over the communication system, "I found something incredible. The Shadow Maw collective consciousness isn't just vulnerable to peaceful thoughts. It's actively dependent on consuming aggressive, warlike civilizations. Their entire biology is based on assimilating militaristic neural patterns." Morrison ducked as his ship shook under enemy fire, but his mind was already processing the implications. "What does that mean for our current situation, Doctor?" "It means they've never encountered a species like humans before," Rodriguez replied excitedly. "We're warriors, but we fight to protect rather than to conquer. Our neural patterns are completely outside their evolutionary experience. We're like a computer virus in their system." This revelation changed the entire dynamic of the battle. Morrison realized that every human thought pattern the Shadow Maw tried to absorb was introducing incompatible concepts into their hive mind. The aliens had evolved to consume predators and tyrants, not protectors and heroes. "All ships," Morrison broadcast to the human fleet, "maintain close contact with enemy vessels. Dr. Rodriguez believes our thought patterns are disrupting their collective consciousness." The battle became even more chaotic as human ships began actively ramming Shadow Maw bioconstructs, their crews protected by armor designed to survive planetary impacts. Each collision introduced more incompatible data into the hive mind, causing system-wide instability that manifested as increasingly erratic behavior from the enemy fleet. As the human fleet pressed their impossible attack, reinforcements began arriving from across the galaxy. The Hegemony Border Guard dropped out of hyperspace first, their pristine vessels gleaming against the stars as they formed up alongside the battered human ships. Commander Thane opened communications with Admiral Chen, his voice carrying the respect of one warrior addressing another. "Admiral Chen, this is Commander Thane of the Hegemony Fleet. We're here to assist in the rescue operation." More ships followed. The Crystalline Collective, peaceful for over 1,000 years, had armed their research vessels and come to fight. The Aquatic Federation sent their deep space exploration fleets, converted into makeshift warships. Even individual merchants and traders arrived, their cargo ships loaded with improvised weapons and crews that had never seen combat, but were willing to learn. Elder Kale watched the impossible sight of dozens of species working together for the first time in galactic history. "They're not just fighting for us," he whispered in amazement. "They're fighting for the idea that someone will come when you call for help." The tide of battle turned when Captain Morrison led a desperate assault on the Shadow Maw mothership, the massive bioconstruct that served as the collective central processing node. The Ironclad, supported by ships from a dozen different species, punched through the creature's defenses in a coordinated attack that would have been impossible without the unity of purpose that the human example had inspired. Morrison's ship penetrated deep into the bioconstruct's interior, fighting through corridors of living tissue and chambers that pulsed with alien intelligence. The environment was toxic to most forms of life, but human marines pressed forward, in their sealed armor, carrying explosive charges designed to destroy the creature's central nervous system. The final confrontation took place in a vast chamber at the heart of the mothership, where the Shadow Maw collective consciousness existed as a physical entity. It was beautiful in its alien horror, a neural network that spanned the entire interior of the bioconstruct, pulsing with the accumulated knowledge of consumed civilizations. Morrison stood before the alien intelligence, his weapon trained on the neural clusters that served as its primary processing centers. Around him, his marines maintained a defensive perimeter as smaller organisms tried to protect their queen. "This is for every species you've destroyed," Morrison said, his voice carrying across the communication frequencies. "And for every innocent life you'll never get the chance to take." The explosions that followed could be seen from orbit, nuclear fire blooming inside the bioconstruct as its central nervous system was destroyed. The death scream of the collective consciousness was transmitted across every electromagnetic frequency, a sound of such profound agony that it caused every Shadow Maw organism in the system to convulse in sympathetic pain. But Morrison's sacrifice was not in vain. As the mothership died, its destruction created a cascade failure throughout the Shadow Maw fleet. Bioships that had operated with perfect coordination for millennia suddenly found themselves without central control, their individual components unable to function independently. The combined galactic fleet, led by human vessels and inspired by human courage, pressed their advantage with devastating effectiveness. Ships that had arrived as strangers fought together like members of the same crew, their crews learning to coordinate attacks and share resources in real time. The battle ended not with a single decisive moment but with the gradual realization that the Shadow Maw fleet was retreating. The ancient enemy, faced for the first time with opponents who fought not for conquest but for protection, found their biological imperatives failing in the face of incomprehensible concepts like self-sacrifice and altruism. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the surviving Shadow Maw vessels flee into hyperspace. Around her, the combined fleet of dozens of species maintained formation, their crews working together with an efficiency that would have seemed impossible just days before. Admiral reported her communications officer were receiving messages from across the galaxy. The Federation wants to open formal diplomatic relations with Earth. The hegemony is offering military alliance. 36 species are requesting humanitarian aid for refugees. Chen nodded, but her attention was focused on the planet below, where human evacuation teams were still working to rescue the last Selthani survivors. The galaxy had changed in the past few days, and humanity had found its place not as conquerors or even as warriors, but as protectors. Elder Kale stood in the observation deck of the human transport ship, watching as Nexus Prime slowly began to heal. The Shadow Maw infection was dying without the support of the hive mind, and the planet's crystalline structures were beginning to regenerate. It would take decades to fully recover, but the knowledge contained in the deep archives had been saved. "We owe you a debt that can never be repaid," Kale said to Sergeant Sanos, who had joined him to watch the restoration efforts. Sanos shook her head, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Sir, where I come from, helping people isn't about debt. It's about being neighbors." The aftermath of the battle saw the formation of the first truly effective galactic defense alliance with Earth and the Zelthani homeworld at its center. The Human-Zelthani alliance became a symbol of what could be accomplished when warriors and scholars worked together, when strength was used to protect rather than to conquer. Years later, when historians studied the Battle of Nexus Prime, they would identify it as the moment when the galaxy learned that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the willingness to protect. The humans had arrived as strangers from a distant Deathworld, but they left as the guardians of galactic civilization. The Shadow Maw collective, ancient and terrible, had finally encountered something they could not consume: the idea that someone would always answer when innocence called for help. And in learning this lesson, the galaxy discovered that even the darkest corners of space could not stand against the light of beings who chose to be heroes. The Deathworlders had kept their promise, and the galaxy would never be the same.